I got revenge on my gold-digging boyfriend. Sometimes love can be the best thing that can ever happen to you. And sometimes, well, sometimes you meet a guy like Jeremy. Let me tell you about Jeremy. And more importantly, let me tell you how I got revenge on him. My loser gold-digging boyfriend. I grew up in a super wealthy family. This meant that I was certainly privileged and used to hang out with people who were as rich as my mom and dad. I got to enjoy long, fun vacations every few months, as well as incredible shopping sprees. I didn't get told no very often, and my parents sort of liked spoiling me. But I don't think I was a good-for-nothing brat. I studied really hard and I wanted to find my own way in life. I saw how hard my parents worked and how passionate they were about their careers, and I wanted to be just like them. They grabbed the bull by the horns and made their own way in life. My mom came from money, but my dad was a self-made man, and they fell in love because of their mutual ambition. But before we move on, like this video, hit the subscribe button, and activate the notification bell. It'll let you live 20 amazing years longer. Trust me, it works. Anyways, back to the story. I wanted someone just like that, someone who could push me to be the best version of myself that I could be. Instead, I met Jeremy, and like a fool, I fell in love with him. Now, I told you I mostly hung out with people as rich as my family, but that wasn't because I was an elitist. It was just that the activities that I engaged in and the school that I went to weren't frequented by blue-colored families. It was normal to have friends who could afford similar luxuries as my family could. He was kind of a bore, so it didn't last long, but I don't regret that experience. He was kind towards me and really smart, so I liked him at first. But after a while, though, I realized that I was just going through the motions. I wanted someone who made me feel something real, someone who made my heart beat faster whenever he kissed me. My second and third boyfriends were rich as well. For different reasons, it simply didn't work, you know? It's no big deal. Some relationships go the distance, and others simply fun anecdotes. When I met Jeremy, though, I thought he was the one. His smile was so bright and big, and he made me laugh so hard. Do you know how I met him? I went out for dinner with some friends, and he was our waiter. He was a bit of a flirt, but I liked him. My friends teased me about liking the guy serving our food, but I didn't see anything wrong with it. He wasn't rich, and that was okay with me. So when the night was over, I was sort of bummed out that I wouldn't be seeing him again. Much to my surprise, as my friends and I were leaving the restaurant, I heard someone walking right behind us. "Excuse me," Jeremy told me when I turned around. "I hope you don't think I'm a creep or anything like that, but I finished my shift in half an hour. Could I buy you a cup of coffee or something?" I couldn't believe it. He seemed so earnest and sweet, and I loved a guy being so forward. So after thinking it over for a moment, I finally said yes. My friends couldn't believe it. None of them, actually, not even myself, had ever dated a non-rich guy. And yet, I told them to go back home without me. I'd be staying at the restaurant, waiting for Jeremy to finish his shift. Our first date was amazing. I can't even explain it. We talked for hours, and he seemed like such a great guy. We shared our first kiss that night, and I felt my heart beating faster. Jeremy seemed like the kind of guy who could give me everything I wanted. I had no need for money, and I didn't want anyone to support me financially. I just wanted to meet my soulmate. And like a total fool, I thought Jeremy was it. He was a really nice guy, and his smile made me melt like warm butter. Now, Jeremy didn't come from a wealthy family. He'd been working since before he finished high school. When I asked him if he went to a college, he told me this big sob story about how he couldn't possibly afford it. "I'd love to study and do something with my life, but I think I'll be a waiter my whole life. And that kills me," he said. And I felt so bad for him. In my mind, Jeremy was a guy who had so much ambition, but life had just dealt him a bad hand. I was the means to help him and was determined to do it. I found myself spoiling him often, buying him new clothes, video games, and even a brand new TV. He was so grateful, and at first he didn't ask me for anything. I was the one giving him stuff just because I liked to see him smile. But after a while, well, things began to change. Requests were subtle at first, and he managed to make me think I was the one coming up with ideas for gifts to shower him with. I was so in love that I didn't even notice it. You know, he'd make these offhand remarks about needing this or that, or mentioning while watching a movie how cool something was. I would think it was nice to surprise him with whatever he had mentioned and actually believed him when he pretended to be surprised. But after a while, he grew bolder. Jeremy thought I wouldn't notice, that I was too in love with him and had already bought his good guy act. Well, I gotta tell you, my mom and dad raised no dummy. So when he started actually asking directly for things, I became kind of suspicious. Sure, requesting a gift or two wasn't anything terrible, but the way he talked? It was almost as if I was supposed to give stuff to him merely because I had more than him, like I owed him something. When he asked me for a gift for his birthday, I didn't think much of it. It seemed normal even. Why couldn't he choose what he was getting? It was a really special occasion after all. But then he wanted more and more, and I got sort of annoyed. But it was far from over. We had our anniversary, and Jeremy asked me if I saw our relationship going the distance. I said yes, that I loved him dearly, and I'd love to build a future together. The key word there was together. I didn't want to be the only one building something, you know? But that was exactly what he seemed to hear. Suddenly, he claimed that he had been fired. But I didn't really believe him. It seemed kind of odd since the restaurant he worked in always was so busy, and he was a good server. Something told me that he had just up and quit, figuring I'd be supporting him from then on, like he had me wrapped around his little finger. I was patient with him at first. I figured I might be overly suspicious, but remained alert to the signs. I noticed that the stuff I bought him suddenly went missing, and I decided to do some research. Lo and behold, I found them in a nearby pawn shop. That lazy bum didn't even bother traveling a bit to actually sell my gifts. Imagine how mad I was. I confronted him and threatened to leave him. Jeremy begged me not to. He looked so heartbroken and sad. I actually thought that maybe, just maybe, I'd managed to reach him. He was going to change and get a job and we'd have a future together. Yeah, right. As if that was going to happen. No, come on. Those kind of miracles don't happen in real life. I decided to give him a second chance, but I was on him like a hawk. Jeremy pretended to be a changed man for like a month or two, and then he figured that I had really forgiven him, and that was when the BS started all over again. Now this is when I got petty. I know I could have dumped him and be done with Jeremy, but it didn't seem fair. He had tried to use me and take advantage of my trust. Why should he get off easy? I had been paying for his utilities, and he even had an extension of my credit card for emergencies. Yeah, you guessed it right. He totally used it for things that no one would consider an emergency at all. I decided to shut off all utilities at his apartment, or should I say my apartment, because, yeah, I was paying the rent. I also destroyed his laptop while he was out on a guys' night with his friends, and cut up the credit cards that I gave him, as well as his own. He was going to have to request them all again. I donated all his clothes so that at least he'd be useful to society one time in his entire life. Sure, I didn't do this all at once, mind you. I saved the most obvious stuff for last. All the smallest and pettiest things I did to him while pretending not to know what he was talking about. He asked me to help fix his laptop, and I told him I was too busy with work to do anything about it. Jeremy didn't understand why his utilities were cut off, and when he called to discover what was going on, he was told that they couldn't give him any information. After all, everything was on my name. Eventually, he finally caught up with what I was doing. I happily told him that he had it coming and he shouldn't use people for their money. He was stunned and tried to pretend that he didn't love me because I was rich. "Babe, you're my entire life," he cried out. But I wasn't going to be giving him another chance. You know the saying, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. He begged and pleaded, but I was done with him. Ever since that moment, his life went absolutely downhill. Jeremy had gotten too used to not working and just doing nothing all day like a couch potato. So he didn't do well on any of the lame jobs that he tried to get. Last I heard of him, he was living at a friend's house and was already overstaying his welcome. He keeps asking me to borrow some money to get back on his feet on Facebook, but I never reply. You might think I was way too mean, but I have no regrets. I gave him a chance to change his ways or move on, and he decided to try and manipulate me. I don't appreciate a guy playing with my feelings just to get a free ride. I hope that Jeremy learned his lesson and doesn't try to gold dig his way into another apartment. But honestly, I think he's too foolish for his own good. He's still super cute, and that can get a girl like me to fall for him for a year or two. But then he'll be right back to square one, and his good looks aren't going to last forever. Thanks for watching. What's the worst revenge you've taken against someone who wronged you? Let us know in the comments. Do you think I went too far with what I did to Jeremy? I'd love to read your opinion. Please don't forget to subscribe and check out other videos on the channel.
They still don't know that I am actually not my brother. Call me crazy, but I had to do what I did. I mean, he stole my girlfriend, the one that I loved for many years. So, of course, I would retaliate. No one ever thought that I could do such a thing. But here it is, my darkest side exposed. If you would ask me a couple of years ago about the relationship between me and my girlfriend Cindy, I would say it was perfect. We had everything. We had the chemistry, the compatibility, the love. I mean, we were simply the perfect couple, or so I thought at the time. What I would come to find out later in my life would shock me. Like every other good thing that comes to an end, my relationship with Cindy came crashing down. It didn't just happen out of nowhere. In fact, it started so slow that neither of us could pinpoint the exact timeline when we started being toxic for each other. At first, it was just a matter of differences. For example, we wouldn't agree on watching the same things on TV. Then, disagreements slowly grew to arguments to fights, and fights to toxicity. Now, we were staying with each other just for the sake of love, because no matter if we were always fighting, we also loved each other so much at the same time. And I'll be damned, I thought it was meant to be. After a year and a half of a relationship, I decided to invite her to New Year's Eve with my family. I had never introduced her to anyone before, so this was kind of a big deal for me. I also introduced her to my twin brother, who was a licensed therapist. "Hi, you must be Cindy," said my brother while shaking her hand. "Jacob doesn't bring every girl to meet with the family, so congrats." Immediately after that statement, Cindy gave me a fierce look. I was shocked at first, but I just brushed it off as a misunderstanding. Then later, while everyone was at the dinner table and I got up to go to the bathroom, she followed me and started arguing. "What did your twin brother mean by Jacob doesn't bring every girl here?" she asked me. "Are there other girls you're dating besides me?" "No, and I don't know what he meant by that," I replied, annoyed from the accusation. "What do you mean you don't know? He's your twin brother, and you're obviously hiding something," she yelled at me. "So what if he's my brother? I'm not supposed to be inside his mind, and I'm not hiding anything. Can you please stop accusing me?" "No, because he said you don't bring every girl here, which means you brought me here, but not the other girls you're seeing," she burst out in anger. "There are no other girls. Are you delusional? If you want to know what he meant, let's ask him what he meant. God damn it, I'm getting tired of this," I yelled back at her. In the meantime, my twin brother and my parents were standing behind us. They heard us arguing and thought something was wrong. I could see my twin brother smirking since he heard his name in the conversation. "I can see you're having a trust argument," said my brother calmly. "I'm sorry that I'm the reason that you're accusing Jacob of having multiple partners. I'll rephrase myself. What I really meant was that he never brought here any previous girlfriend he dated before you. I hope you're clearer now," he said to Cindy. "On the other hand, I can see that you guys have underlying issues in your relationship. As a licensed therapist, I would love to help," continued my twin brother. At first thought, couple counseling seemed like a good idea for both of us. But on second thought, my twin brother, being the therapist, was really uncomfortable for me. "No thanks, we're fine," I said. "Oh, come on, we're not fine," said Cindy. "We definitely need help to go back to where we were at the beginning of our relationship." "Come on, Jacob, what do you say?" asked my brother. "I promise to be as professional as possible." Okay, let's give it a try, but only because we fight a lot and I'd like to stop," I agreed. "Okay, great. I'll see you in my office," said my twin brother. After a week or so, I and Cindy went to my brother's office. There, we tried to talk things over between us, but it seemed like we were fighting even more. I was feeling drained with each passing day, and I even started to give up. Cindy, on the other hand, started falling for my twin brother. How would I know? Well, the therapy sessions went from us arguing to Cindy and my twin brother having long conversations together. With each passing day, he was trying to understand her better and better. Now, whenever we would argue, she would mention him. "Why can't you be more like your twin brother? He knows what I want and he listens to me," Cindy said to me one day. "Are you falling for him?" I asked her. "Of course not, silly. He's your brother. Why would I? I'm just saying that you should be more understandable," she said. I tried to believe her, but there was something inside of me that couldn't quite make the connection. I had this strange gut feeling that told me to keep alert and look furthermore for signs. So I decided to stir things up a little bit. After 3 months of therapy, I decided to call it quits. I thanked my twin brother, and we never went to his office again. I did this purposely to see how Cindy was going to react now that she wouldn't meet my twin again. And to be honest, it worked perfectly. Why don't we ask your brother out for dinner? To thank him for all the hard work on our relationship. You know that we're happy because of him, asked Cindy one night. I don't really have time this week. I'm swamped with meetings, I replied, smirking. Oh, then maybe I can go out with him and thank him for both of us. What do you think? Asked Cindy. I stared at her face to see if she was serious with that sentence or not. Sure, I replied. What place do you have in mind? I asked. Oh, I haven't thought about it, but I think that Italian restaurant where we always used to go would be perfect. He loves Italian food, doesn't he? She giggled. I don't know, does he? I asked. So they went out without me. And what did I do in the meantime? It's not like I stalked them to see if they would do anything behind my back. After all, I trusted them. Well, the truth is that I did not stalk them, but also the truth was that I didn't trust them. That's why I let them alone, to just get the chance to see where this was going in the future. And they did not disappoint. Almost every afternoon, I would catch Cindy texting on her phone, but when I would ask her about it, she would say that it was with a coworker. I never accused her of anything, and I never even checked her phone. I just let them be for a couple of months because I was curious how this would all end up, and it did not end up well. One night, Cindy was running late. After several calls from my side, I just decided to go out myself. I went to a bar that I would go to frequently years ago. I was just about to order a drink when I saw them and my heart hit my throat. My twin brother and Cindy were sitting at a corner, making out with each other. It wasn't even one quick kiss that could be considered a vulnerability of the moment. They were really making out like they had done this before many times. I felt like throwing up. I simply left the bar as fast as I could before they saw me. I went home, and when Cindy returned, I just played dumb. I wanted to just burst in anger, but I refrained myself and kept my calm. The next weekend, I brought Cindy again to my parents' home for a barbecue, and my brother was there too. I noticed them exchanging looks with each other, and there was a lot of sexual tension in the air. My brother went inside to go to the bathroom, and Cindy followed him with the excuse of getting another drink. That was my chance to catch them bare-handed. So I followed them, and what I saw in my parents' living room was outrageous. Cindy was with her back on the wall, and she was kissing my brother passionately while he was rubbing himself on her. I was grossed out by the fact they would do such a thing at my parents' house, but this time I had the guts to just stand there and call them out. Cindy opened her eyes, saw me, and jumped, surprised. My twin brother took a second to figure out what was going on, so he tried to kiss her again. She tried to warn him. Wait, he knows, Jacob knows, Cindy screamed while trying to stop my twin brother from touching her. What are you talking about? Have you told him? Said my brother. He's standing right behind us, you idiot, yelled Cindy. My twin brother turned around and went pale when he saw me. So this is what you two have been doing the whole time, huh? I asked. You should be ashamed of yourselves. Should we be ashamed? Look who's talking. If you would have the guts to treat me well, I wouldn't have a reason to cheat on you, yelled Cindy. In the meantime, my brother was just standing there looking at us, arguing, too ashamed to say anything. I finally had enough of them, and I decided to just leave the house. I went back to our apartment. I packed up and I hit the road. At that moment, I was strangely envying my twin brother and hating my life. But while on the highway, I had a sudden realization that was inspired by pure revenge. My brother and I look the same. He probably has notes about Cindy in his office that can come in handy to know her at a deeper level. I love her, and I cannot stand the fact that she cheated on me, but I also want to be with her. What if I could kidnap my brother and take over his life? I turned the car around and stopped at the first tool shop that I found near me. I got a rope, a Band-Aid, and 4 pairs of shirts with the style that my brother would wear. I put them all in a bag and headed towards my brother's house. Cindy was there already, but they didn't know that I was coming for them. I went from the back and entered the house. Soon as I saw my brother alone in the kitchen, I hit him in the head and dragged his body outside. I tied him up in the trunk and put a Band-Aid on his mouth. I wore the kind of shirt that he had on, and I went inside the house again. When Cindy saw me, She fell immediately for it. She grabbed me behind my neck and kissed me passionately, thinking that I was my brother. "I'm going out to get some fresh air," I said to her and headed for the porch. I came back after 3 minutes holding a letter in my hands. I showed the letter to her, being supposedly from me, telling her about going to China to never come back. Cindy became so happy at that moment that she was jumping from joy of not having to see me again. She continued cooking as I headed back outside to take care of my twin's body. He was awake and terrified. "You thought you could steal my girlfriend that easily, and I would do nothing about it?" I said to him. "She thinks I'm you, and I will use that to my advantage. In the meantime, let me take you to a place where you're going to love staying," I concluded with a smirk.
"Sarah, stop your noise. Your brother is trying to watch cartoons." My mother screamed while I tried to practice the piano. "I need to rehearse. I have a concert soon," I replied. "If you don't stop right now, I'm going to destroy that stupid thing. Roy is watching his favorite show," she said. "Yeah, Sarah, shut up," Roy whined. Roy was 8 years old, and although he was disgusting, my parents considered him to be their prized possession. He was loud, obnoxious, untidy, and the worst student in his class. And all he did was eat, watch cartoons, and play football. He also smelled horrible. On the other hand, I was the best 15-year-old daughter anyone could ask for. I was a straight A student and at the top of all my classes. Even gym. I was the president of the student government and the head of the robotics team, as well as the school's orchestra. My teachers adored me, and I'm pretty sure that all my friends' parents wished their kids were as perfect as me. I stopped playing my piano and decided to study for a math quiz the next day. Suddenly, Roy barged into my room. "What are you doing, stupid?" he asked. "I'm studying for a test. Go away," I replied. He grabbed my calculator, threw it on the floor, and stepped on it. "What are you doing, Roy? I need that. You're so annoying," I screamed. I pushed him off the calculator, grabbed his arm, and shoved him out of my room. I locked the door and tried to continue studying. A few minutes later, both my mom and dad banged on my door. "Sarah, this is unacceptable. How could you treat your brother so horribly? Open the door," said my dad. I opened the door. I was trying to study and he threw my calculator on the floor. I had to put him outside so I could continue working, I told them. "You are a terrible sister and the worst example for Roy. I'm sure he was only trying to help. You're grounded, and I'm taking away your phone for a month," my mother screamed. It was no use replying. They had done this to me countless times. I never understood why they cared about Roy so much, but treated me like I was nothing. The next day after school, I went to my robotics meeting feeling depressed. My closest friend, Brian, noticed right away. "Why are you looking so sad?" he asked. I explained the situation with my parents and told him how I felt, that they'd never appreciate or care about me. "I have an idea," said Brian. "What?" I replied. "Sometimes when my mom makes me angry, I leave home and I don't come back for a few hours. When I come back, she practically worships me. The trick is to make your parents very worried," he said. "If I left the house, my parents wouldn't care. Trust me. They probably wouldn't even care if I got kidnapped," I sighed. "Hey, now that's a brilliant idea. Why don't we fake your kidnapping? My brother and his friends could help. We just need to have a plan." Brian's eyes lit up as he spoke. He loved solving problems. "Well, I suppose I could give it a shot," I said. That afternoon, we went to meet his brother's friends at his house around the block. They all stood around the front porch drinking and smoking. They definitely didn't look like my typical crowd. I felt a bit scared. "Are you sure this is a good idea?" I asked Brian. "Don't worry," he replied. "Is my brother around?" he asked one of the guys. They invited us inside where Brian's brother was waiting. "Hi, I'm Eli," he said, "and this is Alan." He pointed to a guy who was sitting nearby. He made eye contact, and I quickly looked away because he made me nervous. Anyway, Brian explained his idea. Eli spoke to a few of his friends, and they all agreed that they could pull it off. All they wanted in return was $300. This was all the money I had saved, but I decided that if they could get my parents to love me, it'd be worth it. "See you tomorrow night," Eli said as we left. Everything had been arranged. The next day, I couldn't wait. When the evening finally came, I was so excited that it all happened in a flash. We were all seated around the dinner table. Roy was served first, and he was given the best of everything. "Can I have some more chicken?" I asked. No, Roy might want another piece. Stop being selfish, my mom replied. But there are 4 pieces left, I replied. Suddenly, we heard a crash in the living room. 4 masked men with guns walked into the dining room. Nobody move, one of them shouted, and I recognized his voice as Eli's. They tied my family to their chairs. My mom was crying and my little brother was screaming. My father looked angry. Look, just take whatever you want, but please don't hurt us. My money is in my briefcase over there, he said, while pointing. We have lots of valuables upstairs. You can take them all. Just please don't hurt us, he pleaded. I was laughing inside, but I had to look terrified. We'll do whatever we want, one of the men replied harshly. They pulled me out of my chair, tied my hands together, and put a cloth bag over my face. I screamed, Mom, Dad, help me. My mom continued crying and my dad continued pleading for our lives. You'll never see her again, Eli shouted at my parents. They dragged me out of the house and pushed me into the back seat of a car, which was parked outside. They untied me, took off the bag, and all started laughing. That was fun, wasn't it? One of them said. They sped off and parked in front of Eli's house. You'll just have to wait here and we'll see what happens, said Eli. When I got inside, Brian was waiting and talking to the cute guy who made me nervous the day before. Hey, Sarah, Brian shouted. How did it go? Tell me everything, he said. I sat next to them and told them about the whole experience. Everyone was laughing. Someone turned on the music and we ordered pizza. I felt amazing. I was here having the time of my life while my parents were at home terrified about what might be happening to me. I imagined my new life at home. My mom and dad would worship the ground I walked on. I would finally get the recognition I deserved for being the perfect daughter. I'd be able to do what I wanted and they'd give me everything I asked for. Most importantly, they'd make me feel like I was loved. If I was lucky, maybe they'd even realize how rotten Roy was and put him up for adoption. I figured I would hide out at Eli's house for about 2 days and then return home and tell them I escaped. Then they'd feel even prouder of me for being clever enough to outsmart a bunch of heavily armed and dangerous bandits. As the night continued, Alan and I became more comfortable with each other. Brian realized what was going on and gave us some space. We spoke a lot, and I learned a lot about him. He was 17 years old, and he lived alone with his older sister. His parents moved away when they were younger, and he hasn't seen them since. You know, you're one of the prettiest girls I've ever seen. Can I have your number? He said. Thanks. Nobody has ever really said that before. My mom took my phone, though. I don't have it, I replied. The butterflies in my stomach fluttered. They're really that mean to you, huh? Well, it's okay. I have an extra one. I'll just give it to you. He chuckled. He went into another room and came back with a brand new iPhone SE. Here, take it. It's for you, he said. Whoa, this is really expensive. And it's new, too. I can't accept such an expensive gift, I gasped. Then he asked me to sit down and explain that valuable people deserve valuable things. He eventually persuaded me into accepting it. I had only known him for a little while, but I felt so comfortable with him. And yes, maybe my love language is gifts. I slept on the couch that night, and I woke up to a lovely breakfast. Good morning, beautiful. I didn't go home last night because I didn't want to leave you alone. I watched you sleep, and then I decided to make you breakfast. I hope you like it, said Alan. Eli was still in his room sleeping. I also went to the store to get you a few things to wear. I noticed you didn't have anything to change into, and you have to wait here for another day. Don't worry, I washed them already so they're clean, he said. I couldn't believe that such a kind person existed, although I was still wary because I didn't know him very well. I ate breakfast, showered, and changed into my new clothes. After we spoke for a while, Eli walked into the room. Sarah, turn on the television. Brian just called to tell me that your family is on the news, he said. I turned on the television, and there they were. My mother looked worried, and my father looked like a frightened animal. Ha ha ha. I thought while grinning. The interviewer asked, So can you tell us exactly what happened last night? 4 bandits broke in while I was having dinner with my husband and my son. They screamed at us and tied us to our chairs. I was so afraid. They stole some money, a television, and my son's PlayStation. He's been crying all day because it's his favorite thing. We were terrified. They didn't even untie one of us before they left. We had to scream until the neighbors heard us and came to our rescue, my mother said before bursting into tears. But we are thankful for our lives and that we are all safe. she added. Would you like to say anything? The interviewer said to my dad. I'd just like the bandits to understand that my son is very sad right now. You stole his favorite game and he is devastated now. You should all be ashamed of yourselves, he said. I could not believe my ears. Not only did they not care about me, but they lied. Eli and his friends hadn't stolen a thing. I was so angry that I turned off the television and ran outside crying. My plan had achieved the opposite effect. They felt like they had finally gotten rid of me, and this is what they always wanted. Now they could have their perfect life with their son. They did not even care that I was missing. They did not care that I could have been hurt or killed. I sat in the grass and buried my head in my hands. After a while, Alan came and sat by my side. Hey, don't be sad. You're great, and one day they'll regret treating you like this. Why don't you move in with me and my sister? Could I really move in with a stranger? I thought. I realized that this stranger had treated me better than my own family ever did. That night, I went back home, packed a bag of my most valuable things, and gave my parents a piece of my mind. I let them know that they were the worst parents in the universe, and I hoped that they'd someday face the consequences of their horrible actions. I slammed the door as I walked out and never looked back.
My parents and I got into an argument once again. They got me into a business school without even telling me. Yeah, they could do that because we're super rich. You might think that being born in a rich family means everything's great, but it's not. My parents were very rich and famous business people, and I was their only daughter, a single child. So my parents were in charge of each and every decision in my life. Ever since I was small, they decided what I wore, how I walked and talked. They wanted me to act like the rich heiress I was. But I didn't want that. But before we move on, like this video, hit that subscribe button, and activate the notification bell, or else this monster will show up in your dreams tonight. I want to go to medical school, I screamed as we were arguing. I want to use my education to serve the needy. We serve ourselves. You have to look after the business after us, my dad said. Yeah, now don't be a stubborn kid. This conversation is over. The school starts from the day after tomorrow, my mom added. I won't go, I said, crying, and stormed off to my room. I stayed inside for a while, but then I thought I should just go for a drive for fresh air. So I got out of the room, went down, and got out of the house. But as I went to the garage to get my car, it wasn't there. Furious, I went back inside the house and went straight into the living room where my parents were. Mom, Dad, where's my car? I asked. Oh, we told Alfred to put it away, my mom replied as if it was nothing. Why did you do that? I asked again. Since you're not doing what we say and skipping business school, Haley, we're taking away every privilege you get from this house, she said. And your credit card wouldn't probably work as well, and you're not getting any cash from us, my dad added. What? I said in disbelief. Who does such a thing to their child? But I didn't have any money of my own as I hadn't worked a day in my life. And they always had the upper hand because of that. So there was no other option for me but to lose to them. Fine, I'll do whatever you want me to do. I will attend the business school, I said in a disappointed tone. Now that's the daughter I've raised, my mom said and came and hugged me, as if nothing had happened. I hugged her back, but I knew I would get back to my parents for what they had pulled. I had to break their ego. A few days passed, and I even started attending the business school, but I hated it so much. So one day I decided to skip my classes and go for a drive instead. As I was driving, I was thinking about what I should do to compel my parents to send me to medical school in a foreign country without me having to ask for it. Suddenly, I had to pull up my car for a red light, and so I did. I started looking around while waiting for the go sign, but there was a homeless guy on the sidewalk that caught my eye. If I start dating a homeless guy, my parents would be so ashamed they'd do anything I ask, I thought. I got lost in the thought that the plan would work out perfectly. Right then, the car behind me started to honk. It was already time to go, so I drove and pulled over on the nearest parking lot. Before I got out of my car, I covered my face with a scarf. Yeah, that was necessary. Famous parents meant you were famous too. I walked towards the place I had seen the homeless man before. As I reached near him, I saw that he was young and even a little handsome. I stopped where he was sitting and said, I have an offer for you. He looked at me with the most uninterested face ever, so I added, You're going to get a lot of money. Look, lady, I'm not doing anything like that if that's what you're looking for. he said. Ew, no. I'm not asking for anything like that, I said. There was an awkward pause after that. Why don't you come and sit with me in my car? I'll explain everything. And if you don't like what you hear, you can leave with food money, I said. He agreed, and we walked to my car. While walking, I introduced myself, and he told me that his name was Jake. When we got inside, I could finally remove the scarf off my face. I told him about my plan and why I was doing it. I offered him a good sum of money if he agreed to be my fake boyfriend for some time and helped me with getting back at my parents. He thought for a while and said, "That's not a bad offer. You get what you want, and I get the money. Count me in." I screamed in excitement. "Thank you so much," I said. "When do we start?" he asked. "Now," I said, and got off of the car, without the scarf this time. He got off as well, and we went arm in arm to get some food. As you can guess, in no time, there were paparazzi all around us with cameras pointed at our faces. But that was exactly what I had wanted to happen. With a big smile of success on my face, I gave him a spare phone that I had to communicate, money for food, and a place to stay for some nights, and I returned home. When I reached home, I was welcomed by my infuriated parents. I knew that their blood was boiling, as they must have seen the pictures from earlier on the internet. "What is this?" My mom came to me and showed me her phone. There was news with a photo of Jake and me, and the headline read, "Daughter of a billionaire roams arm in arm with a homeless guy." "Oh, that's just the guy I'm dating. Not a big deal," I said. It was my turn to act like it was nothing. "You can't have a problem with who I find attractive," I said again. My parents were speechless. They couldn't even say a single word, so I walked right past them like a diva until I reached my room. Soon after some days, my family was having a fancy fundraiser dinner. That was a perfect opportunity to execute the second strike of my plan. So over the phone, I invited him to come to the fundraiser as my date. I told him that he didn't even have to dress fancy or anything at all. "Just come as you dress usually. I'll pick you up outside the venue," I said. The date of the event arrived, so I went and picked up Jake outside the venue in my car. He was dressed in his normal day clothes that were a little ragged. We drove inside the venue, but before we got out of the car, I had to ask him, "Will you be comfortable inside? There are mean people in there." "Yeah, I'll be fine. I'm good at dealing with mean people," he replied. I was relieved, as I didn't want to hurt him in the process of hurting my parents' ego. So we went inside, and as I had guessed, everyone was looking at us. They were not only looking, but also whispering in each other's ear like some high school mean girls. From afar, I could see that my parents were looking at us as well, so I grabbed Jake's face and kissed him in front of all. My mother came rushing towards me and pulled me aside. "What are you doing?" she whispered. "What everyone else is doing. Attending a dinner with my date," I replied. "Spare us the embarrassment and get out of here with that street dirt you brought with you," she said. Oh my, how could she say that? "Okay, I'll get out, but he's not dirt. He is gold among that dirt," I said, and stormed off with Jake following behind me. I don't know why, but hearing how my mom talked about Jake made me so angry. We drove to where Jake was staying, and I handed him some more money again for food, the place, and some extra cash. I decided not to go home and stay there for the night. In the next few weeks, I started being seen out with Jake some more on purpose. We would go out to get lunch, and there would be paparazzi around us all the time. We were in every magazine and entertainment websites. We were basically the talk of the town, which was more than enough to get the attention of my parents. When I went home, they would come to talk with me with hurtful words or tell me that they were embarrassed, but that was not enough. I wanted them to be embarrassed to the point that they would send me away. One day, my parents were having their probable partners from other countries over at our house for dinner. They hadn't told me that at all because they knew I was going to pull something. Alfred, our helper around the house, leaked the information to me unknowingly. So I thought, I should give my parents what they expect from me. I immediately called Jake and asked him to come over to my house in the evening. It was evening soon, and the people had arrived with their bodyguards. They sat around the dining table with my parents and were talking before the food arrived. Suddenly, the doorbell rang, so I ran to the door and opened it, and saw Jake standing outside. I hugged him and invited him in. After that, I took him straight to the table, and we sat on the 2 empty seats. "Hi, everyone. I'm Haley, their daughter," I said as I got seated and pointed to my parents. "And this is my boyfriend, Jake," I added, pointing to Jake. I could see my parents were furious, but they were smiling as the probable partners were there. They talked to me about my studies, and then they started talking about Jake. "And what does Jake do?" one of them asked. Before Jake or I could say anything, my dad interrupted. He goes to college with her and works part-time at our company, he said. I knew he only said that to save his nose. Then dinner arrived and we started to eat, making a few jokes in between. After dinner was over, they left and I too went to drop Jake to where he was staying. While we were driving, he told me something I hadn't expected at all. The other day, your parents came to see me, he said. Really? Why? I asked. So he told me that they came in and offered him more money than I could ever give to break up with me. And what did you say? I asked. I rejected the offer because I like hanging out with you, he said. I couldn't help but smile at how sweet that guy was. The place he was staying at arrived, so I handed him some cash and he got off. I drove back home to find my parents waiting for me in the living room. Haley, we need to talk, my mom said. So I went in towards them and sat down on the sofa. Okay, about what? I asked. You need to stop seeing that guy, my mom said. What? Why? I asked again. Your dad and I decided that if you stop seeing him, we will pay for the medical school that you had wanted to go to, she said. That was exactly what I had wanted in the first place. But at that moment, I realized something. I liked hanging out with Jake and I didn't want to stop. I was even falling for him slowly. So that was a big dilemma. But then something came out of my mouth that I had never expected. I will never leave Jake for anything, I said, rejecting the offer to get the education I had always wanted. My parents were very disappointed. My mom was trying to say something to change my mind, but I shut her off by interrupting. Please, don't try and talk to me about this again, I said and headed out to go and talk to Jake. Thanks for watching. So what do you think? Will you leave your boyfriend or girlfriend for money? Let us know in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe and check out the other videos on the channel. My name is Abby. I'm in my junior year of high school, and I'm not exactly unpopular. When I walk down the halls in my dresses and skirts, I get some looks from guys, and girls envy my long, shiny hair. One time, a teacher stopped mid-lesson to ask me where she could get the shade of lipstick I was wearing. Everyone knows my name at school, and it's great. But the attention I get from boys isn't exactly positive most of the time. They're all boring and not that good looking. Plus, they all dress like they just rolled out of bed. No guys in my grade or the grade above are worthy of a second thought. But my sister Melissa's friends are. Melissa is a year younger than me. She's a bit of a geek and honestly the polar opposite of me. While I wear heels, she wears sneakers. I wear dresses and she wears sweatpants. I can't remember the last time she didn't wear something dark or faded. She's a tomboy, but I'm more of a classic girl. When we were little, we were very close friends, but we drifted apart as our interests developed. She was into cars, and I was more into dolls. So we stopped being that close, but we still loved each other. As we drifted into different friend groups, she started hanging out with boys. She was friends with these 4 geeky, thin as twigs, and pale boys. Their names are Josh, Mark, Harvey, and Sam. They all wore glasses and were very unathletic. To me, they always seemed gross, which is why I hid in my room whenever Melissa invited them over. But I soon grew tired of hiding in my own house, so I got into this huge fight with my sister and she stopped bringing them home, thank God. Now, I wish she hadn't. I don't know what they did. Maybe they made a deal with the devil, but they had the best glow-up anyone has ever had. Nobody noticed, but over time, they started gaining weight, started dressing better, going to the gym, and gaining confidence. Suddenly, those ghosts that floated around were 4 huge men that were impossible to ignore. And they still hung out with my sister. I'm not gonna lie. I was one of the girls drooling over them whenever they played basketball on the court. But unlike the rest, I didn't glare at my sister. Every girl was suddenly jealous of her. Compared to the baboons I had as classmates, the boys were absolute Greek gods. I was honestly desperate for a boyfriend, so I wanted to be around them. They were the only option. I went to my sister's room after dinner one day. It was very cold and she had clothes lying all over the floor. She also had posters of bands I had never heard of all over her walls. Hey, Mel, can I ask you a question? I approached her with. Shoot, she said. Why don't you bring the boys around anymore? You're seriously asking me that? Abby, you threw a fit and forbid me ever bring them back here. She laughed. I sat down on the floor next to her bed. Well, yeah, but I really hate the way the girls stare at you whenever you hang out with them outside now. So I just wanted to tell you that I really wouldn't mind if you brought them back, I sheepishly said. Melissa was smart. She was sure to see through what I was saying. Oh, really? She asked, propping herself up on her elbows. Are you sure you just don't want to ogle my boys? I blushed bright red at that. Please. They're still the same geeks they were before. I just hate to see girls being mean to you. Well, if it matters so much to you, I guess I could ask them to come play some video games in the basement, she said, going back to the magazine she was reading when I came in. Great! I could hardly contain the smile on my face as I walked back to my room. The next day, I opened the door for 4 terrified boys, each a head taller than me in my tightest top and cutest shorts. Hey, boys, I said, leaning on the door frame and throwing them a flirty smile. Melissa's in the basement. You guys know the way. They looked a bit shocked at how nice I was, and I honestly can't blame them. They walked in and went straight for the basement while I skipped to the kitchen. 20 minutes later, I walked down to our basement holding a tray of fresh cookies. Our basement walls were concrete, and the only color in there was their video game and my yoga mat. Would anyone like some cookies? I asked in a flirty tone. I leaned over the guys as I showed them the cookies I had just baked, and they nearly drooled. I knew these boys, and I knew they were suckers for my grandma's cookie recipe. They attacked the cookies and nearly swallowed without chewing, like wild dogs devouring a deer. Wow, I didn't even get a taste of those, but okay, Melissa muttered, to which Sam responded by throwing an arm around her shoulders. I felt a twinge of jealousy. Hey, you guys don't mind if I do some of my yoga, do you? I asked them while stretching my back a little. Not at all. The boys nearly screamed at the same time. This was too easy. I started with downward dog and moved my way through my routine as I felt 4 pairs of eyes on me and saw red flashes of the game over sign. You idiots, you're not even looking at the screen, Melissa huffed. Abby, get out, you're distracting them. Oh, I'm sorry, I said. It's fine, I'm done with my routine anyways. I gotta go do some homework, I said as I walked back upstairs. I could hear 4 distinct slaps as Melissa slapped the back of the boys' heads. I always found their dynamic kind of cute. As I sat in my purple room with my laptop in front of me, I noticed someone walking past my door quite a few times. Harvey, are you looking for anything? I asked, loud enough for him to hear. Harvey poked his head through my nearly closed door, and his cheeks turned pink. I just wanted to tell you the cookies were great. Even though he was a tall, muscular man now, he still had that shy little boy energy, which I found adorable. Thanks, I smiled. I also wanted to ask you if maybe you wanted to hang out with me sometime, maybe? You don't have to if you don't want to. I just thought I'd love to. I smiled brighter. Great, I'll text you. He smiled like a kid on Christmas morning as he walked back out. I was so happy my plan worked and Harvey seemed to like me, but I didn't expect it to work so well. 10 minutes later, I had a near identical interaction with Sam. And then Josh asked me to hang out, and then Mark. I didn't know what to do. They were all adorable and handsome and sweet, so I ended up agreeing to hang out with all 4 of them. The weekend after the boys came to our house was probably the most busiest week I've ever had. On Saturday, Mark took me roller skating. Then that evening, Sam took me out for ice cream. On Sunday, Josh took me to get pizza, and later I went to the movies with Harvey. They were all so sweet, and I had a huge problem when I realized I was into all 4 of them. I had butterflies in my stomach whenever I got a text from any of them. I felt my heart flutter whenever I got a call from one of them and heard their voice. This was not the plan at all. I only wanted 1, but now I wanted 4. Harvey kissed me on our second date. He took me on a walk late at night to the park, and he kissed me under a beautiful cherry tree. Sam kissed me on our third date. On our second date, he took me to an arcade, and on the third, we took his dog to a dog park, which is where he kissed me. Josh kissed me on our second date. After we got pizza, he bragged that he could make a better pizza than that place, so I dared him to show me. I blew flour into his face, which then he got me back by smearing sauce all over my face, and he apologized by kissing me. Mark waited the longest. Dates with him were always light and friendly, never really romantic. But on our 5th date, he took me to a restaurant, after which he walked me home, and he asked for a goodnight kiss. He was the most shy and precious. I could tell he was really nervous, which is why it made me feel guilty to kiss him. I had never regretted any of the kisses before my date with Mark. The others were casual, but he seemed serious. I lied awake all night thinking about how much it might hurt them if they found out I was seeing all 4 of them. Guilt formed a pit in my stomach. The next morning, I was poking at my cereal at the breakfast table when Melissa came downstairs. Yo, you okay? She asked me casually as she made herself breakfast. No. I rested my head on my palms. What did you do? How do you know I did something? You have the same look on your face as when you broke Mom's vase. She giggled. Right, Mel, I did do something. I rubbed my tired eyes. I feel like I know what it is, but part of me still doesn't want to believe it. Melissa said coldly, What do you think it is? I looked at her with tired, teary eyes. She took a bite of her breakfast and gave me a mean, cold look. Abby, I love you, but I think you're dating all 4 of my best friends at the same time. Please, tell me I'm wrong. I wasn't surprised Melissa connected the dots. She was always smarter than me. My eyes welled with tears at the disappointment in my sister's face. I don't think I'm hungry anymore, she said as she got up, grabbed her keys, and walked out the door. The school year was nearly over, so I took the day off to think. I ignored the boys' calls and texts all day as I thought about what to do. I heard my phone buzz and saw a text from Melissa saying she was coming home early. I went straight to my room to avoid her, but she burst through my door. Why did none of them ever like me the way they like you? Her eyes were puffy and she had tears streaming down her cheeks. What? I stood up from my bed. I've been friends with them for so long, but they never had any sort of feelings for me. Why? I went to her and gave her the biggest hug I could. Mel, you're an amazing girl. If they couldn't see that, it doesn't matter. You're wonderful, you're smart and kind and funny, and people don't usually see it, but I honestly think you're prettier than me. Seeing my sister in tears brought tears to my eyes too. We hugged and cried together in the middle of my room. Abby, I told them. She sobbed into my neck. My stomach dropped, but I also felt some relief. I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have. Mel sobbed. I wiped a tear from her cheek and said, It's okay. They had to find out eventually. The sooner, the better. 2 days later, I decided I should go back to school. I knew my heart would break as soon as I saw the 4 boys I had such strong feelings for. I walked towards my locker in the busy hallway and saw the word player spray painted in bold red letters on it. People all around me laughed and threw paper balls at me. I caught one of them. It was a yearbook page. I sort of expected something like this since Mark was on the yearbook committee. Someone handed me a yearbook, which I opened to see 10 pages of pictures of me on my dates with the boys, full of comments on how I dated 4 boys at the same time. The nicest word they used was player. Mark, Josh, Sam, and Harvey appeared in front of me, all visibly anger. But the hint of sadness in Mark's eyes is what really broke my heart. You better stay away from us, Abby. We never want to hear from you again, ever, Josh said. And with that, the boys walked away and out of my life, leaving me crying by my locker.
Hi, I'm Destiny, and I'd like to tell you all about how my ex-boyfriend conspired against me. If he had gotten things to go his way, I wouldn't even be here telling you this story. Let me tell you a bit about Tyrone so you can better understand what happened to me. So, we are both high schoolers, and I immediately took a liking for him when we first met. He asked me out soon after, and I, of course, said yes. We were the cutest couple at school, and everyone wanted to be just like us. He was so hot and charming and took me out on amazing dates. Everything was going great. We had been dating for a bit more than a year. Actually, we had even celebrated our anniversary. Everything was perfect. Or so I thought. One of my friends told me she wanted to speak to me about something, and it was bad news. I was really worried and asked her what was the matter. That was when I discovered that it wasn't something that was happening to her, but rather something that she knew about Tyrone. She let me know that he was cheating on me, and I was so shocked. At first, I refused to believe her. I was so frustrated with her and tried to deny my boyfriend would ever do something like that. He was in love with me, and he'd never cheat on me. I called her a liar and told her to leave my home. But my friend knew that I would react that way, and she had proof. She had taken a few pictures of Tyrone kissing another girl. Worse still, the woman was one of my rivals at school. I couldn't believe my eyes. I was so mad and immediately apologized to my friend. She told me it was all right. It was only natural I wanted to believe my boyfriend was a good guy. She didn't know if she should tell me about it, but it was too messed up to stay quiet about it. I cried all night long, and she stayed by my side. We talked for hours, but my heart was completely broken. There was nothing my friend could do to make me feel better. The very next day, I texted Tyrone and asked him to meet me at my place. When he arrived, I didn't let him inside. I stood on my doorframe and told him I knew all about his cheating ways. Of course, he played it cool and tried to deny it, but I wasn't having it. I showed him the pictures and let him know we were so over. He was mad at me and told me that I would regret it. He left, stomping his feet all the way to his car. The next few weeks were really rough for me. Tyrone never once apologized, and he didn't act sorry at all. Instead, he seemed to be enjoying his new life as a single guy. He was flirting with all the girls in our class and rubbing the fact that he didn't care in my face. I cried myself to sleep almost every single night. All my friends supported me, and they refused to speak to him. Still, there were many other girls that went out on dates with him as if he wasn't the biggest jerk in the world. He was clearly having so much fun without me, and it really hurt. They say time heals every wound, though, and this happened to be true. Little by little, I began feeling better. It was hard, but I eventually got over my cheating ex-boyfriend. Finally, about 3 or 4 months after the breakup, my friends convinced me to go to a party. I needed to unwind and put myself back in the market. They told me it was a really cool pool party and that everyone would be there. When we arrived, though, we realized, to our horror, that it was Tyrone's home. I was in shock and almost refused to get out of the car. I couldn't be at a party thrown by Tyrone. I had just barely managed to get over him and his cheating ways. It would be too hard to be around him there while he flirted with girls in bikinis. My friends convinced me that if I didn't go, he would win. They admitted that they knew the party was there, but that they needed me to finally face reality and let go of my feelings for that loser. So I decided they were right. I didn't care about Tyrone, and he could deal with the fact that I was at his party, looking gorgeous and flirting with whomever I wanted. I was wearing a beautiful bikini and looked amazing. My friends even helped me with my makeup, so you better believe I was a total babe. People were having lots of fun. Everyone was playing games, partying, and eating. Some students were even in the pool, having a great time. The truth of the matter was, I struggled to relax. At first, all I could think about was when I'd get to leave and curl up in my bed. But as the party got more and more fun, I ended up having a blast. I danced with a few guys, giggled with my friends, and had some delicious food. I even decided to get in the pool and enjoy myself for real. The problem was, I had been sleeping only a few hours every night, so I was really tired. I ended up falling asleep on a big inflatable pool bed. It was so relaxing, and I didn't even realize people were beginning to leave. My friends thought I had gone home with a guy I was flirting with, so they didn't think to look for me in the pool. That's when things went south. Tyrone noticed I was sleeping there, and he apparently was still holding a grudge against me. Remember how he told me I'd regret dumping him? Well, he had been waiting for the perfect moment to take his revenge. I always thought he meant he'd keep dating girls while I watched in distress or something like that. I never thought he might try to hurt me for real. He wanted to make sure my life became a living hell, and his mind went into this really dark place. I still can't believe he ever thought his plan was a good idea. Sure, Tyrone was mean and a cheater, but I never thought he was this evil. His parents were really wealthy, so his entire house was super luxurious. The home was a mini mansion, and the pool had a retractable top that slid over it. This helped prevent things from getting in when it wasn't being used. Sure, they had someone who took care of the pool, but this was far easier, especially when they weren't at home. He watched me sleeping there and then just turned on the mechanism that made the top slide over the pool. You must think that his decision was totally insane, and it truly was. He didn't even hesitate. How do I know this? Because he didn't just leave me there for a minute or even an hour just to mess with me. No, he left me there to get rid of me permanently. Yes, I was serious when I said he had tried to make me leave this world for good by trapping me underwater until I couldn't handle it any longer. By the time I woke up, it was already too late to get out. The top was already over the pool, and I was thrown into the water rather violently. I swam up and then tried to reach the part of the pool with the lowest depth. There I could stand up instead of having to swim to keep my head above the water. There were only a few inches between the water and the top, and that was the only place I had to keep my head above the liquid. I completely panicked, truth be told, and began screaming in horror. I think that Tyrone could hear me, though I don't have any proof of this. In my opinion, it was impossible not to notice my shrieks of fear from the living room. He never came to help me, even when the hours slipped by. I screamed so much that my throat began to ache, and it became hard to speak. I had been in there for hours, but no one was listening to my pleas to be saved. It was a terrible situation to find myself in, and I honestly didn't know how to escape my makeshift prison. 90% of my body was trapped underwater, with only my head above it. I felt so claustrophobic and truly thought I'd end up losing my battle to stay alive. I knew that soon I'd run out of oxygen or energy. One way or another, that would be my end. There was no way I could remain standing up indefinitely. I would eventually fall asleep from exhaustion or faint, and then I'd drown. Again, I tried to scream, but I was so hoarse that almost no sound came out. I couldn't comprehend why Tyrone would do something like this. He was the one who cheated on me, and he was enjoying being single. Apparently, he's one of those guys who simply cannot deal with rejection, even when he deserved to be dumped. I don't know how many hours or days I had been trapped in there when I finally felt like I couldn't keep myself afloat for another minute. That was when I heard a miraculous sound. The top was actually beginning to retreat. By that moment, I couldn't even speak. I was so hoarse that even whispering was impossible. I looked up and saw 2 police officers, as well as my best friends, my mom and dad, and a couple of paramedics. They pulled me out and took me to an ambulance. There, the doctors examined me and they began treating my symptoms. I was apparently suffering from hypothermia and had several complications related to the hell I had just been put through. My friends were so worried, but the doctors recommended they give me some time. My mom came with me in the ambulance, and Dad followed us in our car. Soon we arrived at the hospital, and they continued treating me. I ended up staying there for over a week. When the doctor told her I was strong enough to handle the news, she told me how my friends had been looking all over for me. They ended up suspecting Tyrone and told my parents about it. They called the police, but it took some time to convince them that my ex was capable of doing something nasty to me. When they found me in there, no one could believe Tyrone had taken his revenge to such lengths. He was immediately apprehended and his parents were horrified. It's been a few weeks since the attack, and I still visit a shrink 3 times a week. I'm recovering from severe PTSD and struggle to leave my house. The judge handling my case has decided that Tyrone should be tried as an adult. Even his parents have come over to apologize. I don't think anyone is supporting him after what he did to me. It was a horrible experience, but I survived it, and I am determined to move on with my life. Thank you for watching. Have you ever dealt with a vengeful ex-partner? Tell us about it in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe and check out other videos on the channel.
Hi, my name is Don, and I'd like to tell you how I completely ruined my entire family. And the worst part, I even paid to have it happen. It was cheap, too. It only cost me $99. You might be asking yourself, why on earth would someone pay to have their whole world ruined? And I'll tell you all about it now. It's really upsetting, and I still can't believe everything that happened. Truth be told, I didn't do it all alone. My sister Ava helped me with the whole plan. I was sort of the mastermind behind the whole disaster, and she just helped me pull it through. We never thought things would go so far. Now, for you to understand what happened and how my family fell apart, you need to know a bit about my childhood. When I was born, I was Mom and Dad's only child. I had no other brothers and sisters, and I was really spoiled. They loved me to bits and bought me everything I wanted. It was awesome, of course. I had a really normal and happy childhood. Mom and Dad had both worked, and they did well for themselves. Mom was far busier than Dad, though. She was a really successful doctor and was well-renowned around the world. That meant that she had to go to conferences abroad and was always so busy. She left the house at least twice a week on emergency calls. They seemed to think that this was perfectly normal, so it never seemed odd to me at all. My dad was a real estate agent and traded stocks in his free time. He made a really good living, and we could afford an amazing house downtown. Now, you might be asking yourself why on earth my mom's busy schedule is important, but it'll become clear pretty soon. Now, when I was 4, my mom announced she was pregnant again. You might think that I was super jealous since I was so spoiled, but that wasn't the case. I was so happy. I wanted to have a little brother or sister so badly, and had begged for one for years. I even asked it as my birthday present. A few months later, my baby sister Ava was born. I was so happy, I couldn't believe I finally had a sister to play with. Dad explained that it was my responsibility to be the best older brother possible and always protect Ava. I took this responsibility really seriously. Ava was the best little sister in the world, and I was determined to always look out for her. She was even allowed to play with me and my friends all the time. I didn't find her annoying and didn't mind that she wanted to hang out with me as other siblings do. We were really close, and as she grew older, I took it upon myself to teach her everything I knew. So I taught her how to climb trees and to play with a ball and even do math exercises. She was really clever too, and so she skipped a grade and then another one. So she ended up being only 2 grades behind me instead of 4. My parents were really proud of her, and they loved how I always wanted to look after little Ava. Now, the thing is, people never believed us when we told them we were brother and sister. Everyone thought we were really just good friends and that we just called each other siblings because we were so close. We had to insist and insist before anyone believed we were telling the truth. Kids at our school joked and told us that we were probably adopted. Ava and I laughed about this and shrugged it off. We never believed it might be true since Mom and Dad would have told us about it long ago. We were all really close, even if Mom worked late often and had to take long trips abroad. I didn't worry too much about this. Or at least I didn't until I had a really bad idea and a $100 bill in my pocket. Another odd thing was that neither Ava or I looked anything like my dad. And I mean nothing like him. He has some rather unique features, and neither of us share them. I mean, sure, it's possible that we take after our mom, but it's still super weird, right? Ava always joked about the fact that she made up stories about who our real father would be. She made up the silliest stories and made me laugh every single time. She claimed that there was an astronaut in space that had my big blue eyes and a sailor lost at sea that had her tiny nose. We would try and outdo each other, making up the craziest backstories for these imaginary men. What we never considered was that everything we joked about was closer to the truth than we could have ever imagined. Sure, my real father isn't an astronaut or anything of the sort, but neither is he a real estate agent and he isn't married to my mom. But I'm kind of skipping ahead, so I'll go back to the way things unraveled. Anyways, one day I was browsing online when suddenly I ran into this ad for a DNA test. You know, the type that doesn't only tell you about your mom and your dad, but also your heritage, like many ancestors ago. Yeah, that's the one. I thought it was kind of neat, and also a way to finally put those silly rumors to rest. If someone else joked that Ava or I were adopted, then I could joke right back telling them that I had us tested, and we totally weren't. It seemed like a great idea, and it was only $99, a real bargain if you ask me. Now, I was feeling really curious, but also a tiny bit guilty. Would my mom and dad get upset? I mean, I knew they were my real parents, but they might think I was doing it because I really had doubts. My mom and dad are awesome, and they really love me and my sister. Would it be mean to get this test done? So I decided to speak to Ava about it. She thought it was a great idea, and so much fun. And it wasn't mean at all. We could show our parents what our ancestry looked like and where we all came from. It was a neat present and a fun conversation starter. It would also be such a witty answer whenever someone teased us about looking completely different from one another. We ended up agreeing that it was a good idea, but the problem was how to execute it. After all, we couldn't just walk up to our parents and ask them for a swab or the whole surprise would go to waste. So we began discussing how to get this plan to sail smoothly without my parents suspecting a thing. It wasn't as easy as it sounds, and we came up with all kinds of silly ideas. Many made no sense and were promptly scratched from the test. Finally, Ava came up with a great plan. Since we needed their saliva, there's an easy way of tricking them into giving us a sample without asking for it. We could just grab their glasses of water and run into our bedroom with it. That would make them suspect something was amiss. But if we needed to keep plastic cups for some reason, we'd be free of suspicion. Ava was a really good cook. She loved experimenting in the kitchen with different recipes. So when she said she came up with a brand new juice recipe, my parents immediately believed her. It was genius. We had already ordered the kit and waited for it to arrive. Ava prepared the juice, a few different samples to make it seem legit, and finally we walked into the living room with a few different plastic cups. We had my mom and dad try all of them and then asked them for their opinion. My sister pretended to take notes and then rushed out of the room with the cups in tow. I explained that she was going to modify the recipe according to their opinions. They laughed and thought it was just Ava being Ava. I went into the room and saw my sister already taking saliva samples from the cups. She smiled at me, and I really thought she was brilliant. Everything had gone according to plan. Then Ava went back, making little changes to the juice so that her parents thought she was really working on her recipe instead of lying through her teeth. Our plan worked to perfection. While Ava was busy sweet-talking my parents, I went into the bathroom and swabbed the inside of my mouth. When everything was ready, I mailed it as the instructions detailed I should, and then it was time to wait. It took almost 3 weeks for the results to be in. I was so excited. My sister Ava wasn't at home, but I simply couldn't wait for her to arrive. I opened the envelope and began reading. Imagine my surprise when I read that my father wasn't my real father. I was stunned. I kept reading that sentence over and over again, and I couldn't understand how this could be happening. I immediately called Ava on her phone. She was at a friend's house, but I asked her to come back home immediately. She rushed over, super concerned about me because she could tell I had been crying. When I told her about what happened, she couldn't believe it. She read the results over and over again, just like I had about a half an hour before. We needed to know the whole truth. So before confronting our parents, we ran the test on her as well. We hadn't actually thought it would be necessary to waste another $99 on Ava when they already had my sample, since we were supposed to be siblings, but apparently we had to do it. So we waited another few weeks. You can imagine how anxious I was. My mom and dad didn't understand why I seemed so upset at them all the time, and of course I refused to tell them. When Ava's results arrived, we were stunned. Not only wasn't Mom's husband our biological father, but we didn't even have the same dad. We were half-siblings. That meant that Mom had gotten pregnant from 2 different men, and neither of them was her spouse. Now that we knew the whole truth, we finally confronted our parents. Dad looked absolutely shocked. It was clear he knew nothing about it. Mom began sobbing and finally admitted the truth. She let us know that in the congresses she traveled to, she sometimes would go on dates with doctors from all over the world. We knew she had cheated on Dad at least twice, but it was clear now that she had been unfaithful so many more times. And those late-night emergency calls? Well, yeah, some of them were real. After all, Mom really is a doctor. But some of them were just dates she had and didn't want Dad to know about. You can imagine how badly this messed our family up. Dad almost immediately asked for a divorce, and my mom didn't have the guts to argue. After everything she'd done, the least she could do was make it easy for Dad to walk away. Neither Ava nor I wanted to live with our mom after what she had done. We knew our biological fathers were doctors, but we didn't want to learn anything more about them. Our dad had raised us and loved us so much. He was the only father we needed. Dad told us we could move in with him. He said that he loved us no matter what, and he still considered us his children. That was such a relief. We immediately moved in with him. I haven't spoken to my mom since that horrible night. I still can't believe I ruined my family with a lousy $100. Thanks for watching. What's the worst secret your parents kept from you? Let us know in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe and check out the other videos in our channel.